I love talking rookies. Obviously, we are diving deep into the combine. Obviously, we're going to be looking at what these guys do with their pro day, but I want to reiterate, so much is going to change. For us to sit here and act like we are extremely confident with our top 12, our top 15, our top 20 rankings, guys, we're going to have to take that and amend so much to it once the NFL draft happens that if you're sitting here trading exactly for pick 7, saying, okay, I want Brock Bowers on this team, so let me go get him at 7, you're acting way too fast and way too early. So I want to talk about exactly what we should expect based off historical analysis over the past 10 years in the Dynasty marketplace and exactly how much is going to change. So what I did is I went over to DLF ADP collected by Ryan McDowell. I wish Flock Fantasy's been around since 2014. It hasn't. DLF has though. So we tracked their March Dynasty rookie ADP. We compare that to June, so just 3 months later, and I wanted to see how Dynasty rookie drafts were going a few months out from the NFL draft versus right after the NFL draft. We looked at over the past 10 years because one, I started playing Dynasty in 2014, so I know a lot about the rookie classes since then. And two, that's how long this data goes back. So starting off in 2014, the example I can give is the best class ever, my favorite class ever, where the March ADP went Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, Kadeem Carey, Carlos Hyde, Jordan Matthews, Marquise Lee, Odell, Eric Ebron, Allen Robinson, Devontae Adams, Isaiah Crowell, Bishop Sankey, Kelvin Benjamin, Dante Moncrief, Brandon Cooks, Trey Mason, Jason Morrow, Johnny Manziel, Jeremy Hill, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, Teddy Bridgewater, Charles Sims, Devonta Freeman, Cody Lattimore, Terrence West. Okay, so that was the list and what we had. And then we went and we looked at where those guys stacked up in June. And what did we find? The 103 in Kadeem Carey fell 20 spots. His ADP in June was the 23rd rookie off the board. Isaiah Crowell went from being the 11th rookie on the board to not even inside the top 23 anymore. I mean, you had Dante Moncrief falling 5 spots. You had Marquise Lee falling from about the 106 down to a late first, early second rounder. And on the other end of the spectrum, we had big time risers. Brandon Cooks went from being a early to mid second round pick to the 103 by the time we actually got to drafts. Bishop Sankey went from being the 112 up to pick 4 by the time we got to drafts. So if you were sitting here going, okay, I have the 103, I'm thinking it's either going to be Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, Kadeem Carey, Carlos Hyde. By the time you actually get to drafts, instead of looking at Kadeem Carey or Carlos Hyde, you're instead looking at Bishop Sankey or Brandon Cooks. A night and day difference between the two. I mean, you have Cody Lattimore, Terrence West coming out of nowhere to all of a sudden be getting drafted mid-round 2. And we can carry this right over to what we had in 2015. We're going to be a little bit briefer with the classes from here on out. Hopefully you have an idea of what we're looking at. In 2015, the guys that fell massively, Jay Ajayi went from being a mid-round 1 pick in March to all of a sudden being a second rounder. Devin Funchess went from being pick 9 to pick 16. Sammy Coates went from being pick 16 to not even really being drafted anymore. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, we had some big-time risers. Nelson Aguilar went from 19 to 6. Rashad Perriman went from 20 to 9. Philip Dorsett went from not even really getting drafted up to 13. Going over to 2016. Now, this was a very, very ugly draft class, if y'all remember. You had Zeke at the very top, but outside of that, you didn't have much. I mean, we had Mike Thomas no longer getting drafted after March. You had Alex Collins no longer getting drafted. Rashad Higgins, all those guys were supposed to be second rounders. You had a bunch of guys coming from nowhere like Kenyon Drake, Malcolm Mitchell, Wendell Smallwood, Hunter Henry that all of a sudden snuck inside the top 2 rounds. I mean, really, the story of it, though, is just here in 2016, what we saw is we saw those guys that were getting drafted in round 2 all of a sudden fall down to rounds 3 and 4. And those guys that were getting drafted in round 3 or 4 rising up to round 2. We go over to 2017. If you're looking at this, the big time riser was Kareem Hunt going from 19 to 11. You had Carlos Henderson going from 15th to no longer getting drafted. You had Juju going from 7th down to 13th. That's a pretty big fall, right? Mid-round 1 pick to early round 2 pick. Going to 2018, you're looking at Equanimeous St. Brown, John Kelly, both being early second round picks. no longer getting drafted at the end of the day. Auden Tate, Mark Walton, mid-second round picks to no longer getting drafted. Cortland Sutton goes from the 105 down to the 112. James Washington down from pick 7 to pick 15. And a lot of these guys that weren't really on the radar, Anthony Miller rises 9 spots. Mike Gesicki all of a sudden is a mid-second rounder. So is Naheem Hines, Dante Pettis, Lamar, Traquan Smith, Antonio Callaway. And then we'll breeze by this. 2019, McCole Hardman, big-time riser. Rodney Anderson, big-time faller. Kelvin Hartman fell from being the 107 and not even being drafted inside the top 2 rounds. Hakeem Butler fell from being the 3rd pick overall to, the 20th. I don't know if y'all remember the Hakeem Butler hype around the time of the NFL Combine. Going over to 2020, DeAndre Swift went from pick 2 to pick 5, not a big deal. Zach Moss, 13 to 19. 2020, not much happened. Michael Pittman ended up skyrocketing, but outside of that, it was pretty minute. 2021, you had Kenneth Gainwell from a late first irrelevant. Chuba Hubbard, a late first irrelevant. Jamar Jefferson from mid-second to being irrelevant. And we had Trey Sermon skyrocketing up boards at this point. 2022, James Cook skyrockets. Dameon Pierce skyrockets. Isaiah Spiller plummets. If you remember, Isaiah Spiller was right there neck and neck with Breece Hall. Nobody, including myself, knew how to rank the guys going into the Combine. Once the Combine happened, everybody knew that Breece Hall was in a completely different tier, and I thought Isaiah Spiller wasn't draftable. And Zamir White goes from being a late round 1, early round 2 pick to not being draftable. And then going to this past year, you look at 2023. If you remember where we sat in March, Sam Laporta was not getting drafted. Jonathan Mingo wasn't getting drafted. Jaden Reed wasn't getting drafted. Tank Bigsby wasn't really getting drafted. All of these guys picked up steam. All of these guys became relevant about the time of the NFL Combine. We go over to Dalton Kincaid. He rose from 17 to 10. We go over to some big-time followers. Josh Downs was the 8th rookie last March. He ends up with the ADP of 21 after the draft. Tajay Spears was the 11th guy. He ends up with an ADP of 22. Zach Charbonnet falls. JSN and Gibbs end up getting flipped. Sean Tucker goes from being a mid-second round pick to no longer getting drafted. So if we look at this, I want to go ahead and pull up the rookie rankings on flogfantasy.com and try to speculate what we may end up seeing over the coming months. But just because you think you know what you're doing with your early mid to second round pick right now, you don't. We need to pump the brakes. We need to be realistic and look at it through a range of outcomes lens. So let me pull up the rankings. And as I do this, of course, if you ever want to see any rankings, you can find those on flogfantasy.com. Code FLOCK will get you 30% off any subscription. Yours truly will break down your Dynasty Fantasy Football team in a podcast with promo code FLOCK as well. Plus, that's where you can find our Dynasty Trade Calculator, our Dynasty Trade Finder, all the premium content, including all the rookie draft guides from all your favorite creators. But yeah, looking at this right now, if we are breaking down the tiers, I would be very confident in the first tier of 5 guys. If we're looking at Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake May, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels, all of these players have the security that they are going to be a top asset in Dynasty because they are grounded with their projected NFL draft capital. If we look at what Las Vegas sportsbooks are telling us, if we look at what NFL insiders are telling us, they're telling us that pretty much all 5 of these players are penciled in to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. Now, if something unforeseen happens, we go back 2 years ago. Malik Willis is the quarterback 1 in March. Everybody loves the guy at the NFL Combine. I remember him giving like $20 to a homeless person or something, and everybody losing their mind. And he was QB1 by a mile. Everybody thought he was going to go ahead and pick it. And then he falls to round 3 of the NFL draft. If Jaden Daniels, if Drake May somehow fall to late round 1, round 2 of the draft, then yeah, of course they're going to fall down these rankings. But looking at Las Vegas sportsbooks, who know significantly more than I do, right now they are pricing that as if it's not even an option. So I do think that the top 5 tier in Dynasty is going to be very much penciled in at this point. Now going over to what we have with the next group of guys. Brian Thomas, Rome Odunze, and Brock Bowers look like they are in that tier of 3 right there, 6 through 8. I think that you are pretty comfortable with Rome and Bowers, given the projected draft capital that we have with these guys as well, because a lot of it's going to come down to the NFL draft and where these guys go, not both with their draft capital, but also their landing spot. I think that you have pretty safe projected draft capital for Brian Thomas, Rome Odunze, Brock Bowers. Really, the only surprise could possibly be Brian Thomas Jr. falling to round 2 of the NFL draft, which isn't the expectation. But if that were to happen, Thomas may go from being like the 107, and just say hypothetically, he falls to being a second-round pick in the NFL draft, then he's probably going to be falling into the range of the next few wide receivers that we're looking at, where you're looking at Xavier Worthy, Ladd, Franklin, Adonai, Keon Coleman, where they're all sitting there and they're all in that ambiguous third tier of the wide receiver position that we have in this draft class. And this is where things, in my mind, can really get mixed up. I mean, I just talked about this in the Dynasty startup draft that we did 2 days ago when we were asked about Adonai Mitchell, and I'm sitting here going, okay, best case scenario in my mind, he's wide receiver 5. And that projection of him being wide receiver 5 in this class is based under the assumption that he is a round 1 NFL draft pick. He crushes the combine, obviously. Teams are very excited about him. Film guys love him. He goes round 1 in the NFL draft with that athletic profile. I'm probably fine putting him at wide receiver 5. I'm probably fine putting him at wide receiver 6. However, you see Adonai go round 2, round 3 of the NFL draft, which isn't the expectation as it stands, but the entire point of this video, based off that historical research that we've done over the past decade, there'll be a handful of players in this draft that we are completely surprised by and that actually do fall significantly in the NFL draft. So, I mean, I don't think it matters who it is. Xavier Worthy, he's not falling based off the 40. We see how NFL teams value speed. But if we get blinded, if Ladd ends up falling to round 3, if Franklin ends up falling to round 3, if Adonai falls around, if one of those guys were to fall, Keon Coleman, then all of a sudden they're outside this tier. So instead of planting your flag right now and saying, Ladd's my guy, no matter what happens, 109, I'm taking Ladd. I'm trading up to the 109 so I can get him. I love him so much. Let's pump the brakes a bit. Going over to running back, we have Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson as the top 2 guys. Obviously, we saw one thing that's important to note with those rookie changes is running back was wildly more inconsistent month to month with the rookie evaluation process as opposed to what you had with wide receiver. Because a lot of times at wide receiver, yes, those guys would rise, but it's not they're going up 15 spots. Or it's not like back in 2014, Kadeem Carey is falling from the 103 to all of a sudden being a late second round pick. Running back is going to be a little bit more dependent on landing spot and draft capital as opposed to wide receiver, because running back's a lot more about the opportunity, whereas wide receivers more so about the talent profile. Running back looks like Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson are the top 2 guys. If Jalen Wright comes out, Jalen Wright goes round 1 in the NFL draft based off his comp. I'm sorry, he's not going to go round 1. If he goes inside the top 50 picks in the NFL draft and both Jonathan Brooks as well as Trey Benson fall to being late 3rd round picks, then Wright's the RB1. I mean, the number one thing, and I'll end it here. Everybody got so upset with us at the beginning of the week when we looked at a mock draft and JJ McCarthy was a top 5 pick in the NFL draft in that mock draft. And we said, well, we're going to stay flexible. If McCarthy goes as a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, it does not matter what I think of him. It does not matter what you think of him. He is no longer a late round 1 and a rookie draft pick at that point. Obviously, super flex. And instead, if he's a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, he doesn't have to be a top 5 pick in your Dynasty rookie draft, but it should be pretty damn close. It all of a sudden is a conversation. Do I want Malik Neighbors? Do I want JJ McCarthy? Do I want Rome or do I want JJ McCarthy? Which right now, nobody's asking that question because that's not the current projection. You go to NFL mock draft database, McCarthy's not that high. But if you just follow the trends on how this thing's going, a lot of times you will see these quarterbacks come from nowhere and get the NFL draft capital or fall much further than you're expecting, such as Levis, such as Willis, or in years past, I mean, Trubisky going higher than anybody in the world thought, I mean, just 4 months prior. And the same thing with Josh Allen as well. But I think that's all I have for you. I want to reiterate, obviously, it is very important to understand all these rookies, but you can't just pencil in your rankings now. You can't just say, I'm doing this at my rookie pick no matter what. Please stay flexible as we go through pro days. Please stay flexible with the NFL draft because a lot's going to change. And you don't want to be the person trading for the 110 to go grab one specific wide receiver on March 9th. And then all of a sudden, by the time we get to May, that guy's no longer even an option there at that pick. But thank you again. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day. If you want to get access to my Dynasty Rookie Rankings, all the Dynasty Rookie Premium content, Dynasty Trade Count, Dynasty Trade Finder, all on flogfantasy.com. Code FLOG, 30% off your subscription. Yours truly will break down your Dynasty team in a podcast as well. But thank you. Appreciate you. And hope we get to see you out with the video tomorrow.